Welcome to my Sacred Revenge channel, where betrayal isn't just exposed, it's answered.
The annual Beaumont family dinner was in full swing at the Jade Pagoda, that same overpriced Cantonese restaurant where we'd gathered every year since I could remember. My uncles, booming with self-importance, boasted about their new high-end sedans, my aunts, with thinly veiled contempt, compared designer handbags. And my cousins. They were masters of ensuring everyone knew precisely how dazzlingly successful they believed themselves to be. Before I begin telling you my story, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you'd like to share your own story, feel free to write to us. Adrian, my cousin Finian, called out from across the spinning Lazy Susan. His voice laced with that perfect, grating blend of feigned concern and outright condescension. "Still riding the tram?" he asked, a sneer playing on his lips. "I could put you in touch with some excellent lease brokers, you know." I subtly adjusted the cuff of my simple charcoal shirt, just enough to momentarily glimpse the subtle gleam of the timepiece underneath. "The tram works perfectly well for me, Finian," I replied, my voice calm. "Oh, how wonderfully practical," Aunt Genevieve chimed in, her tone dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Though surely, with your little computer gig, you could manage something a bit more substantial." I fought back a triumphant smile. My computer gig, as they dismissively labeled my thriving tech enterprise, was precisely why I wore a watch that, by itself, was worth more than every glittering trinket, every expensive dish, and every square foot of this entire establishment combined. Not that any of them, even with their supposed sophistication, would ever recognize a Thorn Grande Sonnery Minute Repepper. Only a handful, 17 to be exact, had ever been meticulously crafted. And their true ownership remained a closely guarded secret among the world's most discerning collectors. Speaking of careers, Uncle Silas announced, his voice reverberating through the room, Finian just secured a junior partnership at Blackwood and Associates. The declaration was met with a chorus of fervent congratulations. Following in his father's illustrious footsteps, Aunt Genevieve beamed, her eyes shining with pride. Finian puffed out his chest, adjusting the heavy, generic luxury timepiece on his wrist. It was almost certainly his bonus gift, and just as certainly, nowhere near as exclusive or valuable as he imagined it to be. "And what about you, Adrian?" My father's voice, tinged with that familiar, soul-crushing disappointment, cut through the clamor. "Still tinkering with your, what do you call it? Application development." Before I could formulate a response, the waiter arrived, laden with another round of aromatic dishes. As I reached for the soy sauce, my sleeve instinctively rode up again. This time, however, my father's keen eyes caught the fleeting movement, and then the watch. His chopsticks clattered to the porcelain table, the sound stark in the sudden hush. "That's," he stammered, his face draining of all color, "that's impossible." The entire table fell into an unnatural silence. My father, a man who had once possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of horology, had been a dedicated watch collector for decades. That was until the financial crash of 2008 had mercilessly stripped him of his cherished collection, forcing him to sell every single piece. He knew, with an undeniable certainty that only a true connoisseur could possess, exactly what rested on my wrist. "Is something amiss, dear?" my mother asked, her gaze flitting nervously between my father and me. That watch, my father's voice, was barely a whisper, a ragged gasp of disbelief. "It's a Thorn Grande Sonnery. There are only 17 in the world. It's worth over $2 million. Finian finished the sentence, his Blackwood-trained eyes, finally, belatedly, recognizing the astronomical value of the piece, give or take, depending on the current market fluctuations. The profound, agonizing silence that followed was, to me, utterly exquisite. Aunt Genevieve's ostentatious designer handbag, which had been the subject of so much earlier admiration, suddenly looked cheap, almost a pathetic counterfeit. Uncle Silas's gleaming luxury sedan now seemed decidedly common, barely a step above a mass-produced family car. "Oh, this old thing?" I asked, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips, deliberately echoing Aunt Genevieve's earlier dismissive comment about her designer purchase. "Just something I happened to acquire at an auction last month." "But how?" my mother sputtered, her voice incredulous. "You take the tram, Adrian?" I leisurely took a sip of my jasmine tea, savoring every microsecond of the moment. "Have you ever paused to consider why I choose to take the tram, Mother? It's primarily because I'm constantly on urgent calls with our Tokyo headquarters. You can't precisely conduct sensitive international business while navigating rush hour traffic, can you?" Tokyo headquarters. Fenian's customary smirk had vanished, replaced by a bewildered frown. "What exactly does your app do, Adrian?" I calmly pulled out my phone, not the newest, flashiest model, which had prompted their earlier snickering and condescending glances, and displayed our company's latest valuation report. "We specialize in developing cutting-edge, AI-driven financial trading algorithms," I stated, sliding the phone across the polished table toward Finian. "In fact, it's highly probable that we power some of the very systems you utilize at Blackwood and Associates." His eyes, normally so confident and self-assured, widened perceptibly as he absorbed the information on the screen. Uncle Silas, curiosity finally overcoming his pride, leaned over Fenian's shoulder, peering at the screen. A choked gasp escaped his lips. 10 billion, he wheezed, his voice thin with shock. 11.2, actually, after last month's latest funding round, I calmly corrected him. "Though valuations, as you well know, Finian, can be rather volatile, can't they?" The expensive, but ultimately ordinary timepiece on Fenian's wrist suddenly looked pathetically small, almost a child's toy. My father remained utterly transfixed by my thorn, his expression a complex tapestry of profound recognition and deep, lingering regret. He was the one, after all, who had meticulously introduced me to the intricate world of horology, patiently explaining the rich history and unparalleled craftsmanship behind each tiny gear and spring. He had instilled in me a deep appreciation for these miniature mechanical marvels, long before he had lost everything in the crash and, in his despair, convinced himself that the staid, traditional world of banking was the only truly safe career path. "The auction," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "The one at Kensington's last month." I nodded slightly. "Anonymous buyer," I confirmed, a subtle gleam in my eye. "I knew, somehow, you would recognize it eventually," my mother said softly, her voice filled with a newfound tenderness. "It was always your father's dream piece." "Precisely," I replied, meeting her gaze. "And why do you believe I acquired it, Mother?" The remainder of the dinner unfolded in an uncomfortably heavy silence, punctuated only by the occasional clink of chopsticks against porcelain and hushed, almost apologetic requests to pass the various dishes. My cousins, typically so boisterous and eager to trumpet their achievements, seemed to have collectively lost their voices, their self-congratulatory pronouncements abruptly silenced. Even Finian, for once, refrained from mentioning Blackwood and Associates. So Uncle Silas finally broke the suffocating quiet, his voice noticeably softer, almost tentative. "This company of yours, Adrian, it appears to be quite successful." Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another notification from our London branch. "You could certainly describe it that way," I said, my gaze briefly scanning the incoming data. "We currently process approximately 30% of all AI-driven trades throughout Asia. That figure will likely climb closer to 40% after next month's impending merger." Merger. Fenian's investment banker instincts, dormant for the past hour, abruptly jolted back to life. "With whom?" he pressed, leaning forward eagerly. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that just yet," I replied, a knowing smile playing on my lips. "But rest assured, you'll undoubtedly be reading about it in the Global Financial Chronicle soon enough. Your firm, Fenian, is actually handling a portion of the due diligence." Actually, Fenian's already pale face went positively ashen. "The Zenith Capital acquisition. That's your company?" My father's head snapped up, his eyes wide with astonishment. "Zenith Capital, the Singapore-based firm that's revolutionizing Asian markets. Among other things," I said, maintaining my deliberate vagueness. The non-disclosure agreement wouldn't lift for another week, and I rather enjoyed this gradual revelation. Aunt Genevieve, her earlier disdain completely evaporated, leaned forward, her expression now one of intense, almost desperate interest. "But Adrian, darling, why on earth didn't you tell us any of this before?" she cooed, her voice practically dripping with concern. "All this time, we were under the mistaken impression that you were struggling, taking the tram because you simply couldn't afford a proper car." I adjusted my thorn watch once more, allowing the soft restaurant light to glint off its perfectly crafted complications, a silent testament to its undeniable mastery. "Sometimes," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "true success doesn't require loud advertising." Speaking of advertising, Uncle Silas abruptly interjected, his voice regaining some of its former boisterousness. "My investment portfolio could certainly benefit from some diversification. Perhaps we could discuss—" "I'm sorry to interrupt, Uncle Silas." I cut him off politely, though firmly, "but we are, in fact, fully funded. Our last funding round was oversubscribed by approximately $3 billion. The table descended into an even deeper, more profound silence. $3 billion in oversubscription was, in plain terms, more money than all of their combined investment portfolios. My mother, her eyes now filled with a mixture of pride and confusion, gently touched my sleeve. "But son, why on earth did you keep all of this a secret for so many years?" "Because I wanted to build something truly substantial, Mother," I replied, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. "Something real and enduring. Not merely to chase after fleeting status symbols or to desperately seek family approval." My father remained fixated on the watch, his gaze unwavering. "The auction," he said suddenly, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. "There was a fierce bidding war. The final price went far, far above all the estimates." "I know." I smiled, a small, knowing smirk. I was the other bidder. "But there were two." His voice trailed off, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "You deliberately drove up the price. I had to ensure no one else could possibly acquire it." I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "It was your dream watch, Dad. I wasn't about to let it slip through my grasp." Fenian, desperately attempting to salvage some semblance of his shattered dignity, cleared his throat. "Well, at Blackwood and Associates, we always say, a rising tide lifts all, actually." I cut him off, checking my phone again, a perfectly timed interruption. "Your trading desk just finalized the transition to our new algorithm platform. The official memo should be distributed by Monday morning." He deflated completely, his much-vaunted junior partner status suddenly seeming utterly insignificant, almost comically trivial. Aunt Genevieve, ever the social chameleon, swiftly tried a different tack. "Adrian, darling, you simply must come to our country club next weekend. There's someone truly delightful I'm dying for you to meet." "I'm afraid I can't," I replied smoothly. "I'm flying to Singapore next week on my private jet. A board meeting, you understand. Your jet." Uncle Silas's voice was barely a whisper, filled with a new, unfamiliar deference. "Just a modest one, really," I replied with a touch of deliberate understatement. though I usually prefer to take the tram to the airport. Better for the environment, you know? And far less hassle with airport parking. After dinner, as my relatives fussed with their expensive coats and ostentatious car keys, my father quietly followed me outside. The night air was crisp and cool, and I could see the faint wisps of his breath as he struggled to find the right words. That watch, he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. It was the one that was always in my study. The very picture. I kept on my desk for 20 years. I nodded, my gaze meeting his. Right up until the crash forced you to liquidate your entire collection. He winced visibly at the painful memory. The year 2008 had struck our family with devastating force, transforming him from a revered horology enthusiast into a man consumed by fear, relentlessly pushing his children toward the perceived safety of careers in traditional banking and finance. "Is that why you bought it?" he asked quietly, his eyes searching mine. To prove something to me, I pulled back my sleeve once more, allowing him to truly examine the magnificent timepiece. The intricate moon phase complication shimmered under the faint glow of the streetlight. Its perfect craftsmanship, a testament to dreams that soared far beyond the mere accumulation of wealth, seemed to pulse with a quiet power. "I bought it, Dad," I explained, my voice soft because every time I visited your study as a child, you would tell me stories about this watch. You spoke of how only 17 individuals in the entire world would ever have the privilege of owning it, about how it represented the absolute pinnacle of human artistry and precision engineering. His eyes misted over slightly, a tear threatening to fall. "I remember when I first started my company, I kept a picture of it too, just like you did. Not," I continued, "to remind me about money or status, but about precision. About building something truly perfect, something genuinely rare and extraordinary." Just then, Fenian and Uncle Silas burst out of the restaurant, both furiously talking into their phones. No doubt frantically calling their respective brokers to frantically research my company's stock performance. Aunt Genevieve was, with an almost comical lack of subtlety, showing my mother pictures of her friend's impossibly perfect daughter on her phone. "Here," I said, beginning to unbuckle the watch from my wrist. "It was always destined to be yours." My father recoiled, shaking his head vehemently. "I can't, Adrian. It's far too much." Actually, I smiled, a hint of mischief in my voice. "I managed to acquire 2 at the auction. This one is for you. My other one is safely awaiting me in Singapore." I figured one masterpiece per continent was a perfectly reasonable acquisition. Strategy. His hands trembled visibly as I gently placed the watch into his outstretched palm. "2," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "But that's $4 million. I simply shrugged. "Roughly what I generate in interest each month. Besides, some things, Dad, are simply worth more than money." My mother approached us, still clutching Aunt Genevieve's phone, a hopeful glint in her eye. "Adrian, dear, about this lovely girl." "Sorry, Mom," I said, checking my actual phone, the unpretentious one that housed our secure company applications. "But I'm already seeing someone. She's the head of AI research at Cambridge University. We actually met at a rather fascinating conference where I happened to be the keynote speaker." Various relatives within earshot nearly gave themselves whiplash, their heads snapping around in unison to stare, their mouths agape. "You know," my father said softly, his gaze fixed on his new watch, a profound sense of peace settling over him, "I always wondered why you worked so tirelessly on those computers instead of following Finian into the much safer world of banking. Remember what you used to say about this watch, Dad?" I asked, my voice tender. "That its true value wasn't in its astronomical price, but in what it represented. Someone's relentless, unyielding pursuit of perfection." He nodded, a profound understanding in his eyes. "That's precisely what I built," I affirmed. "Not just Another trading company, but something precise, something rare. Something that is fundamentally changing the way the entire industry operates. My phone buzzed again, a gentle reminder that the Singapore Exchange would be opening its doors soon. My father noticed, and a warm smile spread across his face. "You should go," he said, a renewed light in his eyes. "Markets, my son, wait for no one." "Actually," I said, pulling 2 pristine tickets from my jacket pocket, "why don't you and Mom join me in Singapore next week? Come see firsthand what your son has truly built. First class, of course," I added with a wink. "On your jet, my mother asked, her eyes wide with unadulterated excitement. "No," I grinned, leaning in conspiratorially. "On the tram." "Just kidding, Mom. Yes, on my jet." As we exchanged our goodbyes, I overheard Finian earnestly explaining to Uncle Silas why making junior partner at Blackwood & Associates wasn't, in the grand scheme of things, all that significant. Aunt Genevieve, her priorities swiftly realigned, was suddenly profoundly interested in the burgeoning tech stock market, and my other cousins, variously, almost desperately, Googling my company, their faces illuminated by the frantic glow of their phone screens. But none of that truly mattered. What mattered most was watching my father, his face alight with a long-lost passion, show my mother his new watch, meticulously explaining its intricate complications with the very same enthusiasm and awe I remembered. From my own childhood, some things I realized then are genuinely worth more than any amount of money. Like the profound look on your father's face when he understands that his son didn't just succeed financially, but succeeded spectacularly, while remaining steadfastly true to the very values he had instilled in him. I took the tram home that night, as was my usual habit. But this time, I spent the entire ride quietly scrolling through old pictures of my father's cherished watch collection, meticulously planning how I would, slowly but surely, begin to rebuild it for him, one priceless masterpiece at a time. Sometimes, the most potent form of triumph isn't about ostentatiously displaying your wealth. It's about using that wealth to lovingly restore what truly matters. And sometimes, just sometimes, choosing to ride the tram doesn't mean you're broke. It simply means you're far too engrossed in building an empire to spare a single thought for what anyone else might possibly think of you. Conclusion and life lesson. This story teaches us that true success isn't about external validation, material possessions, or the approval of others. It's about staying true to your values, pursuing your passions with relentless dedication, and building something meaningful. Sometimes, the greatest victories are achieved quietly, and the most profound revenge isn't about tearing others down, but about elevating yourself and those you love, restoring what was lost, and demonstrating that genuine wealth lies in purpose and passion, not just bank accounts.